In this episode, we will hear more from Eric Jacksch, security expert on what's at stake with the FBI versus Apple case.
In a perfect world, we'd be able to say we're just going to open this one phone because this person has committed an act of terror and we need to understand them. But the reality is you can't create a tool that magically will only strip away the privacy of terrorists while protect the privacy of everyone else. That simply isn't possible.
There is so much at stake here: our privacy and the protection of citizens. Which side is right? Apple or the FBI? Welcome to WRLWND Radio. I'm your host, Marcelo Sagdeo. Joining me is Eric Jacksch. Eric is a security expert and a columnist for IT in Canada. So Eric, with the ongoing battle between the FBI and Apple, many are for and many are against the FBI. A new poll suggests that nearly half of Americans support Apple in its fight against the FBI. As a security expert, what's your take on this?
Well, I think it's important, Marcelo, to realize, first of all, and foremost, that Apple doesn't really have a choice. They have to fight this. The FBI are effectively asking Apple to create a weapon against their own product and directly their own customers. If Apple does this, it's a really slippery slope. The fact that this is becoming, partially a battle in the court of public opinion really just shows how many Americans are aware of the larger implications. And this case really raises a lot of questions. Can courts actually compel a vendor to create something new? And if so, we really got to ask: isn't that a type of power that legislators should be considering, and that laws should be enacted about? Is it really appropriate for the FBI to use some really old legislation to try to do an end run around the fact that the government won't force Apple and other manufacturers to put backdoors in their products?
So based on this, you are saying that the FBI should not be forcing this, and also Apple is going to be on a slippery slope if they do go ahead with something like this.
Well, I mean, the FBI in many respects is doing their job, right? The FBI's job is to deal with criminals and terrorists. We all deplore terrorism, and there's no question about it. And the FBI is vigorously pursuing them. But I think we have a situation here brewing in the United States where the government really, I don't believe the U.S. government is prepared to bring in legislation saying that vendors like Apple need to have a backdoor into their products for law enforcement. So we have a case here where law enforcement is then saying, well, let's dig up some really old legislation and ask a court to make Apple develop it. And I think that's a real slippery slope. I mean, this is not a tool that will only be used once if it is created.
The poll that I referred to was conducted for Reuters, which found that 46% of Americans support Apple, while 35% are in disagreement with Apple. Can you give us reasons for both sides of the stance, both sides of Apple and the FBI?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to realize that terrorism is a very serious issue. And I certainly can understand how everyone involved in the investigation, and certainly families of the victims, want answers. And they want everything done. They want every no stone left unturned to get at that information. And that is a very emotionally charged issue and very, very understandable. The authorities in this case, and this is certainly not new actually in this case, I mean this is the old ploy, want to, are really positioning privacy and security on opposite ends of the spectrum. Essentially what they're saying is we need to violate people's privacy in order to keep them safe. It's a very old argument, and it's a flawed argument. On the other hand, particularly with the revelations about global surveillance and some of the other things that have been going on, globally, including within and by the United States, I think Americans are very, very aware of the threats to their privacy, and they're very aware of the larger implications of the decision saying that we can force this vendor to create a tool to crack open their own products. if you can do it to Apple, you can probably do it to any other American company.
Right. So what about the fact that you're asking Apple to allow them just to open up this specific phone in a secure setting, and it's only for one phone? It's for Farouk's phone. What about that scenario?
Well, it's pretty difficult to believe that it would only be used one phone. I mean, how do you put this genie back in the bottle? I mean, if Apple creates this tool for the FBI right now, that sets a precedent. And got to believe that within the United States, the FBI and a number of other federal and state and local agencies will be lined up behind them, saying, "Well, you did it in this case, so why is my case any less significant?" The other thing we have to keep in mind is that we're focusing very much on the United States here, but the rest of the world is watching this as well. And if a U.S. court can order Apple to do this, I mean, Apple has operations in many other countries worldwide. They have physical stores, and they have a presence in China. They have stores in Canada. They have stores, in quite a few countries. So, if the United States government can order Apple to do this, what's to stop the other countries as well?
Yes, I understand what you're saying there. But the FBI is saying, or they're asking Apple just for the specific phone. So if Apple is controlling that software, if they're doing everything from their end and having that control over the specific phone, isn't that safe?
I mean, in a perfect world, maybe it would be possible in a perfect world. And I think, Tim Cook said it very well in his interview. In a perfect world, maybe it would be possible to create something in the circumstances around which you can open up one phone. But we don't live in a perfect world. And if this goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court decides, in fact, that yes, the FBI can use this legislation and then the courts can order this, then how long will it be until that it's used again?
Right. So I think the purpose of the legislation would be for post event or after the fact, so they can come back and say, well, this happened in the past, and this happened with Farouk's phone. We got the information. Now something else happened. A major terrorist attack happened. Can we have something similar like that, where you can give us access to this specific person's phone, so we can have information from that? So I think that could be the precedence there.
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned the word legislation, and I think that's very important to realize that, there, to my understanding is there's no law in the books in the United States that says that a vendor can be forced to create this type of tool. This is an attempt to interpret some very old legislation in a way that's favorable to the FBI forcing Apple to do this. If this, in fact, is going to be the way forward, if this is the future, that software vendors can be essentially ordered by a government to create a tool to break their own products, then I think that there should be some very specific legislation dealing with that, including the conditions under which it can be done.
Right. Now let's consider statements and standpoints from like tech moguls. Like, for example, Bill Gates, he's standing behind the FBI in this matter. What's your take on that?
I mean, it's very tempting to say, well, of course he's not standing with Apple because Apple is his number one competitor. But I don't understand. I don't understand the reasons for his for his approach. And quite frankly, we're kind of be wondering what that means from a perspective of Microsoft customers. I don't want to read anything into it that perhaps isn't there, but I really think Bill Gates is really, really off base on this.
Okay. So in the same interview that you alluded to, in which Tim Cook spoke to the ABC News, he said that this issue is not just about privacy, but also it's about public's safety. Isn't that ironic? If Apple is going to create the software to unlock the iPhone, wouldn't that help to keep the public safe from terrorist activities?
Well, I think it comes back to the old argument, should we all live in glass houses so that law enforcement can just look in and make sure that everything is okay? In a perfect world, we'd be able to say we're just going to open this one phone because this person has committed an act of terror and we need to understand them. But the reality is you can't create a tool that magically will only strip away the privacy of terrorists while protect the privacy of everyone else. That simply isn't possible. So, you know, if Apple were to do this, and if they are ultimately forced to do this, then it's going to have very significant privacy and safety implications for all of us. You know, Tim Cook's argument that people have information like the location of their kids on their phone. You know, there's some legitimacy in that argument. But I think we also have to realize when we step back that Apple is in the business of making products for their customers, and their customers want privacy. If I lose my iPhone, I don't want someone to be able to open it up and to get at the very personal information in it. I don't want people to be able to send and receive emails in my name. I don't want them to impersonate me and send messages to my friends and family. So yeah, there is a safety and privacy issue as well, and I think it's logically flawed to try to consider you know, privacy and security objectives to be in conflict. They're typically not.
Right. So, as you know, the FBI is saying, okay, this is just a specific case. It's just for a specific phone. We just want to have access to this phone because this person has conducted a terrorist activity on our soil. Now, given that fact, shouldn't Apple comply to this? They have done this in the past. They've given information over in the past. I've heard on the news they've done this over 40 times. By not doing this, isn't Apple harboring terrorists?
Well, I think first of all we have to recognize that Apple has handed over everything that they have, right? So, and there's a fundamental difference between using a court order to compel a company to hand over information they have versus compelling a company to create a new tool, you know, if we want to call it that. You know, Tim Cook referred to it as a cancer. I like to think of it more in terms of a master key.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference there. I don't think Apple at all, and in fact, if you looking at some of the media reports, they're actually suggesting that the FBI in some ways has bungled this case. They went and they did some things that actually made it more difficult for them to retrieve
Right.
the information.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't. I don't see a harboring terrorism point of view. I mean, ultimately, I think it's going to, if this case proceeds, it's going to be the Supreme Court of the United States that gets to decide ultimately whether or not Apple will be compelled to do this. You know, there's also another aspect to this, and so far this debate has all focused on the legal, ethical aspects of this. But there's also the other side is, should this even be technically possible? That really hasn't been discussed, but we have a device here that's being designed to protect data. It has some really good security features. The data on the device is encrypted. To access it, you need to enter a PIN. If you enter the PIN more than 10 times, the data is erased. The other question that we should be asking on the technical side is, why or how or even is it technically possible to upload a modified operating system to this device without destroying the data in it? And in fact, if it is possible to do that, it suggests a security vulnerability in the product.
Would this be considered as Apple is doing this to boost sales, to gain publicity?
No, I don't think so at all. I think I think this is probably a very painful experience for Apple, and it's going to be very expensive in terms of the litigation. As I said when we started, I don't think Apple really has a choice. I mean, they're in the business of building these products, and they're being asked to undermine the security of their product. You know, it's very easy, and it is understandable that the FBI is saying we need this for this one case, but that's what a case is about, right? The FBI doesn't go to court and say we have 30 different cases and we need court orders for all of them. Cases are dealt with one at a time. So of course the FBI is saying we need this tool to access this one phone. But I mean, it would be totally naive to believe that once that tool is created, that there won't be another court order days or months down the road saying, oh, we need this tool for this phone now.
I would have to disagree there with you, Eric. I think the majority of people just see Apple as the white knight trying to save the day and save their customers from privacy lost, and just wanted to be seen as somebody who's standing up for them instead of just complying with the government to protect its citizens.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but we have to realize that Apple's a business as well. So, are they doing the right thing to protect their customers? I think they are, but also it's in line with their business needs. And then how do you stop that tool from proliferating? I mean, governments do not have a stellar record when it comes to security. If the FBI has it, how long will it be till other parts of the FBI have it, other parts of the U.S. government? And I said it's a terrible slippery slope.
Right. Finally, so from your standpoint, how would this play out? Just briefly, which side do you think will emerge as the winner?
I really don't know. I'm hesitant to try to even guess what the Supreme Court of the United States is going to decide if and when it reaches them. And there's always the possibility that legislators may intervene. I know Tim Cook says that, or said in the interview, that he intended to speak to the president about it. Again, I don't know what direction that's going to go in, so I don't have a prediction for you there.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for joining us here today. Truly appreciate having your feedback and your comments.
Great to be here. Have a great day, Marcel.
If the FBI had played this right from the start, they would have the information in Farouk's iPhone today. But they didn't. They've changed the password for the iCloud account, causing it not to back up to iCloud. If this was not done, then they could have just plugged it in the iPhone and the data would have been backed up to iCloud. Then they could have just gone to Apple with a court order and get that information. Because of this hiccup, the FBI does not have the information that they need. We will continue to watch this case closely and bring you up-to-date information as this unfolds. And again, we'd like to thank Eric for his thoughts today, and thank you for listening. I hope that you find this episode interesting. From all of us here at WRLWND Radio, thanks for listening today. Be sure to head on over to iTunes and subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star rating. This is your host, Marcelo Sugdeo, saying stay safe in the tech whirlwind.